That would be very problematic. Yeah, you're not going to see that. All right. Good evening. We're learning Maseches Gittin Daf Yud Beis. Buckle up, everybody. Buckle up. The truth is that this Gemara shouldn't be so hard, but one of the brises that's quoted here is only quoted like in a truncated way, so we're kind of missing a flow in the brisa, which makes it a little harder. But we'll be able to navigate it together. We are on Yud Beis Amud Aleph. 8 or 9 lines down at the 2 dots, we learned in our Mishnah, Shem Yirtzeh Shelo Lazon, that there was an iteration where a person, a Baal, can say, I don't want to feed my Eved. And that's going to be the sugya that we're discussing today, is that actually the case, where a Baal can say to the Eved, Asei imi ve'eni zancha, work for me, and all of the proceeds that you make come to me, and you need to worry about your own food. So let's see if we can infer from our Mishnah and a couple of other places if this is true. It says the Gemara, Shamas Mina. What do we learn from our Mishnah that says that the Baal can say, I don't want to feed you? It must be Yochel Harav Lomar Le'eved Asei imi ve'eni zancha. A very simple inference. It's not really an inference. Our Mishnah stated it pretty black on white, that we are allowed, a Baal, a Rav, is allowed to say to his Eved, so maybe we have a raya that this is the case. Says the Gemara, not necessarily. What might have been going on in our Mishnah when he says, I don't want to feed you? It could be the Amar Leit, say not that all of your proceeds go to me and you need to feed yourself, but perhaps you can work, and in addition to finishing the work that I need, the money that you make, you can use to feed yourself. So says the Gemara, that can't be, because the Mishnah that we learned yesterday, the Mishnah in Yud Aleph Amud Beis coupled together the world of Gittin Nashim and the world of shiur Avadim. And when you have an ukimta on one case, you must have an ukimta on the other. So if in fact it's the case that when it comes to the Eved, that we're talking about a case of tzei ma'aseh yadecha lemezonosecha, dechavase gabi isha de'amar latzi ma'aseh yadecha b'mezonos isha amaylo. Why can we not have that case? We know that we can't have that case scenario because we know it's in the ksuba that a husband is obligated to feed his wife. The rules are different. So it says the Gemara, the cases are in fact different because isha b'delo safko, by a woman, if ever there's a case scenario where she doesn't have food, then the husband has to feed the wife. But maybe we should say, to make the cases equal, Eved nami b'delo safik, the Eved won't have money, says the Gemara. That person's not an Eved. If your Eved is not able to produce enough that he can't even feed himself, then he's not worth his weight. Just forget it. Just get about it. Avda denahum krase lo shavya, an Eved denahum krase, the bread of his stomach is not equivalent. Then lemari ulemarate lemai misbay. Then why would the master or the mistress want him? He is useless. So the Gemara therefore says this can't really be what's going on in our Mishnah, because we don't have a case where it's equal between get ish and shtar shichur. Therefore, we don't have a raya. Therefore, we don't know the answer to our question yet of whether or not the Rav can say to the Eved, "Asei mi beni zancha."
It's only applied for Eved Canaan, not an Eved Ivri or Amid, correct?
This applies
only to Canaans, only Eved Canaans.
Yeah, we'll see.
Not for Jewish.
Yeah. That's correct. We'll see a raya for that in the Gemara a little bit later. So now the Gemara tries again. We tried, we swung and missed. We don't have a raya yet as to whether or not it's acceptable to say asei imi ve'eni zancha. So Tashma, third of the way down on Yud Beis Amud Aleph. This brisa is the one that I was referencing earlier. That's kind of, it's presented piecemeal. Would have been a lot easier if it was all presented together. But here's the beginning of the brisa. Eved shagala la'ari miklat. You have an Eved that exiles himself to an ir miklat. An ir miklat is utilized when a person kills someone b'shogeg. So this Eved killed someone b'shogeg, and he has to go to the ir miklat to keep himself safe from the goalei hadam, from the family members who are interested in retribution. So while he's in the ir miklat, ein rabo chayv lezono. I don't have to pay for it. That's his fault. I don't have to pay for him while he's in the ir miklat. He shouldn't have killed someone. Granted, it was an accident, but that's not my problem anymore. Says the Gemara, but not only that, ella shemaise yodav lerabo. So part A is that I, the Rav, am not chayiv to pay the Eved. I don't have to feed him while he's in the ir miklat. And part B is that any proceeds that he makes while he works are mine. He's still my Eved. So it's an interesting split where on the one hand, I don't have to feed him, but at the same time, I get to keep the proceeds. Shmamina, what do we see from here? By virtue of the fact that it said Ein Rabo Chayav Lezono, that when the Eved is in the Ir Miklat, that the Rab doesn't have to support him. What do we see from here? Shmamina, Yochol Harav Lomar, Asei Imi Ve'eni Zancha. We see from this brisa about an Ir Miklat that an Eved is in fact allowed to just say to this guy, you work for me, but I'm not feeding you. Go scrounge for food, go dumpster diving, knock on doors, not my problem. This is how the Avdos should work. So the Gemara says, maybe we have a raya from Ir Miklat. The Gemara responds halfway down 5 lines before the wide lines. You're incorrect. What is this case of Ir Miklat talking about? To Amar Lo, say, he's not telling him, I don't care about you. He's saying, you can work, but some of the money that you use to work, you need to feed yourself with, but I'm not feeding you. Says the Gemara, Ihachi, then what was the next part of the Bryce of Maisa Yodav Amayla Rabba? If you're saying you're allowed to work and you need to feed yourself with the proceeds of your work, so then why later in the Bryce does it say that Maisa Yodav, go back to him, that the work of the Eved is a stira? So the Gemara responds, Liha Adafa, when the Bryce says that Ein Rabo Chayav Lezono, so what does that mean? That means that I'm telling you, you can work and feed yourself with your own money that you make. That's fine. But if you make any extra money beyond what you need to eat, I get the extras. That's what ha'adafa means. Says the Gemara, that should be pashat. Ha'adafa pshita, that should be obvious. Says the Gemara, not necessarily. He's my Eved. He's a zero. He doesn't have his own bank account.
No, I mean, in America, before the Civil War, that a lot of slaves would, the masters didn't have work to keep them busy on the plantation or wherever. So the slave would say, let me go rent myself out. And they would rent themselves out to someone else. They would basically get a wage. Yeah. And whatever, and he had to the difference he kept, and then he would buy himself his freedom. That happened very frequently. So
we'll see on the next page that there is a scenario where Avadim are going to ask their own case scenario, but you cannot compare slavery in America to the halachic form of Eved Kanani.
Right. But I'm saying that there is economically, it
correct
has happened.
I'm sure it has, but here the Gemara says it is pashut because my Eved, all of his proceeds go to me. That's the profile of an Eved, is that you work for me. What you do, the labor of your hands goes to me. That was the standing assumption of the Gemara. So the Gemara says,
still, whatever he's called,
the Rab
is still paying for the food. It's just in an indirect fashion.
Not necessarily, because it could be that the person was able to produce a product for his master and make money. The master only really cared about the produced product. And the money that came as an aside, let's say he works for tips. So he busts tables. The master says, I want you to bust tables. So the tables have been bussed and clean. The guy gets a couple of bucks extra on the side. So the guy can keep the tips. The Gemara is saying, no, he can't, not if he's an Eved. The Eved has to give over any extra money. So let's say he eats $10 a day. That's his food budget. That's what he needs to survive. So $10, but he made $20 today. So the extra 10 that he made goes back to the Rab.
No, but that's not what I was saying. I was saying that it's still considered, at least the way this is written, that the Rab is basically still responsible for his food. He's just letting him get it in a different way.
In this version, that's correct. The Gemara here is rejecting the Havamina of Aseimi ve'eni zancha, that you, the Eved, can work for me and I won't pay you. The Gemara is saying you cannot learn that from the Gemara of Ari Miklat. And that's exactly correct. The Gemara says, because we're dealing with a case where the Rav said, say go work and feed yourself. I'm letting you use your time with me to work and feed yourself. You're right. That's rejecting the Havamina. We were trying to say that maybe an Eved could say, a Rav can say to the Eved, Aseimi ve'eni zancha, work for me and I won't pay you. Go knock on doors, go dumpster diving. So says the Gemara, like you're saying, from the Bryce and Ari Miklat, you cannot prove that. Okay, so ha'adafa pshita, we would have assumed that the money is obvious. Why then, if we assume that all the extra money is obviously going to go to the Rav, why mention it? Ma'u detema. That since when the Eved works, if he only makes what he needs to eat, no money goes to the Rav. So to ki isle, I might have thought the ki isle, when there is extra money, nami lo lishkol mine, that perhaps the Rav, the master, will not take the money from the Eved kamash malan, that's not true. So there was a havamina that because there are certain circumstances when the Eved makes money and doesn't give it to the master, which is when he makes less than his food requirement, again, like $9 a day, let's say, and he needs $10 of food. So then no money goes to the master. So there was a havamina that maybe, therefore, that even when there is extra, it wouldn't go to the master. Kamashmal. So it says the Gemara, what is that? These rules should apply everywhere. The case of Ari Miklat. Why are we discussing the case of Ari Miklat? This should be true across the boards. It doesn't have to be a case of Ir Miklat where like he's in a faraway location. It could be true any day of the week that I could say, go work and feed yourself and I get the extra. So the Gemara says you're 100% right. The reason why we brought the case of Ari Miklat is because there's a chiddush to be learned from the case of Ari Miklat. Last of the short lines, end of the line. Sal kadai techamina. I might have thought that the pasuk says v'chai. What is the pasuk? Lanus shamar otzech asher yirzach esrei bivlidas v'hu lo sanelom mimoshel shom nas elachas he'arim ha'el v'chai. So the Gemara says, and he should live there. Maybe because he's in a place where he knows nobody, I have to give him chiyus tfei. I have to support him even more. So that's the chiddush of the Gemara, is that the halacha, even when the eved is in a more complex place, I don't need to change the way I treat him, kamash malan, that the rules apply similarly both in an ir miklat, which is a more complex place for an eved, and even in a regular place of where the eved lives. So says the Gemara, I understand what you're saying. You tried to say aseimi ve'eni zancha, but you failed because really that Bryce and Ari Miklat could have been talking about, instead of saying aseimi ve'eni zancha, work for free. It was like, no, you can work. Say, go work and then feed yourself. Says the Gemara, that's not possible. Because the Bryce of Ir Miklat has a continuation. What's the continuation of the Bryce of Ir Miklat? The Gemara says aval. Isha shagol sala are miklat. If a man's wife accidentally killed somebody, b'shogeg, and then she ends up being golsa, she ends up being exiled to an ir miklat. What's the din over there? By lachai b'mezonoseha. Okay, what does that imply? Michlal tilo amarla. He must not have said to her, say, go out and feed yourself. Say ma'aseh adecha lemezonosecha. The Brycer says the husband's obligated to pay, which means that if a husband's obligated to feed her now, he clearly didn't tell her to feed herself. Okay. That if he had said, go work and feed yourself, and I won't ask you for the money that you spent, why then would the Brisa say, and if that's true by the Isha, umi the Seifa de lo amarla, if it's true that by the wife, if it's true that the husband did not say to her, go work and use the money that you benefited from your work to feed yourself, then Reisha Nami, in regards to the case of the Eved, it must also be the case of Delo Amarla, where he didn't say to her, say, go out and spend money and feed yourself. If that's true, we're back to our original question that maybe we do have a raya that you can say, Asei imi ve'eni zancha. Says the Gemara, nope, not correct. 2/3 of the way down, 3 lines into the wide lines. Really, le'olam de'amarle. Really, both by the wife and by the Eved, all parts of the Brisa of Ir Miklat. There's no question, says the Gemara, that the message that the Rav gave to the Eved and that the Baal gave to the Isha is where he says, say, go and work, and I won't take your proceeds. You can feed yourself. The Isha b'delo safka. But we're talking about a case. Why did the Brisa say specifically by a woman that it's chay b'mezonoseha? Because b'delo safka, she wasn't able to make enough money. And now here's another part of that very same Brisa. Again, this is the third piece of the Brisa, all laid out over various lines. The Gemara says, "V'amidikatani seifa." We have another line that says, "V'im amarla," and if in fact he would have said to her, "Tz'im ma'aseh b'mezonosecha rishoi." Oh, so if the Seifa is saying an iteration that if he would have said, go work and you can use the money to feed yourself, what does that imply about the earlier parts of the Mishnah? Michlal de Reisha, de lo amarla. It must be that earlier in the Mishnah, in the Brisa about your Miklat, the husband must not have said to the wife, go work, and whatever money you make, you can use to feed yourself.
If she kills someone, that's why she's got to go to this.
Anyone who kills by accident, only b'shogeg. If you kill b'mezid, you don't have to. What?
If she killed.
Yeah, it's a good question. The Gemara doesn't say, and it doesn't really matter. But anyone who's killed b'shogeg, let's say Rahman al-Islam, a person is driving, and they kill someone while they're driving. That case of shogeg. What? Right. Yeah, that's Makos. The Gemara there discusses all those cases. So it's not every case. It has to be a case where there's like a significant shogeg. So in a case like that, then a person is allowed to go to the Ir Miklat because the Torah gives a reprieve for murder for the family members of the one who died. Those people are called a Goel Hadam, the ones who redeem the blood. They are allowed to kill the accidental murderer unless they're in an Ir Miklat. So an Ir Miklat is a place of refuge for accidental murderers, so the families can't get to them. And in the biblical times, there were 6 of them, 3 on the eastern side of the Jordan, 3 of them on the western side of the Jordan. The Torah speaks about all of this. So that's where she was. Anyways, the Gemara says we're back to our question over here because it can't be that in the Reisha that we're talking about a case where the husband said to the wife, go work and you can use the money that you make to feed yourself. So it says the Gemara, Hachi Kamar. Really, here's what's going on. V'im maspekes, if she does have enough food, and the Omar Law, if she has enough food, and he says to her, that if she does have enough food, if she does have enough work, and therefore enough food, and then he says to her, why don't you go out and just whatever money you make, Rishoy. Says the Gemara, if you know she has enough money, so God Pashat that works. Of course that should work, that you're going to tell her to go do your thing. So says the Gemara, Chiddush. Usually when the Gemara speaks about tznius, we're typically pretty strict about it. So it says the Gemara, Maspekes Maila Memra. If we know she has enough money, Pashat, this should work. The Gemara responds 3/4 of the way down, that all of the kavod of a woman is internal, which is a pasuk that's code word for women should be super modest. And maybe in its application over here, it's not appropriate for a woman to have to make herself so public in order to fundraise, in order to make sure that she can put money on the table, food on the table. Kamash Malan, that she is allowed to do that. I've had people knock on my door, Mishulachim, Mishulachos, both men and women. Of course, the percentages are 95-5. Have you had this also? I've had. Yeah, I've had it with tattoos and a shetel. Dvarim pshutim. What? Yeah, I had that in my house on Finch about 10 years ago. What?
I'm shocked.
Yeah, but it's harder to say no because we're so used to the profile of the male, and we're like, it's harder to say no. But the Gemara says that's not a lack of tznius. All right. So says the Gemara, let's continue. Lema ketanoi. Perhaps the discussion of whether or not a Rav can tell an Eved, asei imi ve'eni zancha, perhaps that is really a machlokas tanoim. Let's see. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, Yachol ha'eved lomar lerabo b'shnei b'tzores. An Eved is allowed to say to his master in years of famine, listen, you got to figure something out, boss. O parnaseni, o hotziani lecheres. You either have to give. There's no work for me to do, like you were saying, Kevin, earlier. The plantations are dead. The fields are dead. I have no work to do. I can't even work for you to make money. But I'm gonna die. You gotta figure it out. O parnaseni, either give me money, o hotziani lecheres, or let me go and let me become a full-fledged Jew. We'll see what the application here is in a minute. That's Shita number 1. And v'chachamim omrim, nope, harishus biyad rabo. So maybe this is the machlokas. The first opinion that says that you have to feed me. So that opinion is that you're not allowed to tell an Eved, asei imi ve'eni zancha, work for me for free. And the second opinion, which says biyad rab, harishus biyad rabo, is that he always has the latitude to say asei imi ve'eni zancha. So perhaps this is the machlokes. My lav b'hakamiflage. Perhaps the machlokes of Rav Shimon ben Gamliel and the Chachamim in regards to years of famine is as follows: the Mar Savar Yachol. The Chachamim are of the opinion that we are allowed to say Aseimi ve'eni zancha. Umar Savar Eino Yachol, and Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, who says that the Eved is allowed to say O Parnaseni O Hotzianu Lecherus Eino Yachol. He's not allowed to say Aseimi ve'eni zancha. You can't starve the guy to death. You got to feed him. Says the Gemara, no. It may be true there's a machlokas about it. We'll see that there's certainly a machlokas amoraim about Aseimi ve'eni zancha, but it's certainly not a machlokas tanaim from here. Why not? Because the Gemara says, V'tizbara, is it logical to assume from this brisa that we actually have a machlokas about Aseimi ve'eni zancha? After all, why is the language of Hai O Parnaseni O Hotziani Lecherus? What do you mean Hotziani Lecherus? He should have said O Parnaseni O Tainli Maise Yodai Beparnasasi. I mean, cherus. We're talking about whether or not it's possible to say asay miveni zancha. So if that's what Reb Shimon ben Gamliel and the Chachamim are arguing about, then what does cherus have anything to do with this? We're talking about funding this guy's stomach, get him some food. So therefore, it shouldn't have said cherus. It should have said or give me ma'aseh yadai b'parnasasi mibayle. And furthermore, if the machlokes is whether or not we're able to say asay miveni zancha, what does this have to do with years of famine? It's always true. Great. So again, if you want to say that there is a machlokes tanoim in regards to asay miveni zancha, whether or not we can totally shaft an eved and say, work for me, but I'm not feeding you, go knock on doors, go dumpster diving, is that allowed? Yes or no? That there may be a machlokes, but it's certainly not from here. Ella, because that doesn't make sense. And what must be going on in this brisa that's speaking about Shnei B'tzores, years of famine? To Amar Le, it must be where the Baal said to the Eved, where the Rav said to the Eved, say Ma'aseh Adecha L'Mezonosecha, U'Shnei B'tzores Lo Sipek. Really, we're talking about a case where the Eved did say, you can use the money from your work to feed yourself. I'm okay with that, no problem. But in B'Shnei B'tzores, it happened to be a year of famine, and Lo Sipek, he wasn't making enough. So now, in that frame of mind, here's the Machlokes, Rashbag Savar, O Parnaseni, O Hotziani Lecherus. Why did Reb Shimon ben Gamliel say either feed me or let me free? The let me free was a very critical language. Why? Ki hechi dechazu li inshi. People will see that I'm a freed slave, now I'm a full yid, and then umerachmin alai. They have the green card. It's not stam. These people are real. But v'rabbanon savre, no. If the guy who's a giver is a giver, he's a giver across the board. Man demerachim abnei chori. People who are going to be sensitive and giving to those who are bnei chori, people who are bnei chori and they're mamish, they're Jews now. So then, great. They're also going to have rachamim on an eved. Remember that an eved still has halachic status of some kind, like an isha, whatever the parameters are. So that's what this machlokes is all about. And therefore, again, no raya one way or the other about asay imi ve'eni zancha. Now we're going to see two sets of comments, one from Rav and one from Rav Yochanan, and we'll see that Rav and Rav Yochanan do have opinions on the matter, and we'll see, of course, as we always do between Rav and Rav Yochanan, that there's a machlokes. Tashma, 3 lines from the bottom. Da'amar Rav. Rav says as follows: Hamakdish yedei avdo. A man who says about his slave that all of the proceeds of the slave are now hektish. Oso ha'eved, what should he do for food? Love, the ochel, the osa uporea. He needs to borrow money, turn that into food and eat. Then he needs to work and pay off what he borrowed to eat. Shma mina, yachal harav lomar leved asay mi beni zancha. What do we see from this brisa? What we see from this brisa is that in a case where the Rav says that the Eved, that everything he does is hektish, he has to fend for himself, dumpster diving. So he has to go borrow food from people and then pay back on his own dime. So that's a beautiful raya. Says the Gemara, not necessarily. Perhaps there was already food that was given to him. There's no raya from the brisa that there was no food given to him. Says the Gemara, if food was given to him, then why is he borrowing to get food? If I've given you, my eved, an allocation for food, why are you dumpster diving? Why are you now borrowing to get more food? Says the Gemara, laha adafa. He wanted a little bit of extra food. He's a fresser. You gave me 1,000 calories. I want to eat 2,000 calories. So I go and I borrow money. That's on me. Says the Gemara, hektish. Perhaps the administrators of the Beis HaMikdash would say, listen, no extras for you. Ad hashta sagilach below ha'adafa. Really, you've been working just fine with no extra food, 1,000 calories a day. V'hashta nami tiskilach below ha'adafa. Maybe you shouldn't actually be pushing to get more food, so therefore it's all on you. Says the Gemara, that's really not what hektish would do. Because remember what this servant is doing. All the proceeds of this servant go to hektish. So hektish is invested in this guy being a good worker. So says the Gemara, hektish gufe nichale. For hektish, for themselves, it's good that this person should be eating well. Ki hechi de lishbach avde, so that this eved is well fed and he'll be a better producer. You know, it's like workplace satisfaction. If you do a better job of retaining your staff, you make them all happier, their production is much greater. We all know that a medium talent employee who is very well managed is better than a fantastically talented employee who's poorly managed. Much rather have the medium people than the more talented one. So says the Gemara, okay, but we have a significant issue here. Remember that we said that all of the handiwork of this slave goes to hektish. How does he pay back for the food he borrowed? Says the Gemara, Osa uporeya. How is he paying people back? Everything he does is hektish. Says the Gemara, kama kadishle. Every time he produces one little trinket, it's instantly hektish. So says the Gemara Chiddush. When do things get sent over to hektish? Only when it is a full pruta worth of production. But pachos mishava pruta, when it's less than the production of a shava pruta. So let's say we're talking about a dime, and here I only produce a nickel. If a dime is considered a pruta and I produce only a nickel, the nickels I can use to pay people back. And that's how we pay them back first. After that, all the money then goes to hektish. And says the Gemara, Hachanami mistabra, it's logical to assume that Rav is of the opinion that we can say asei imi ve'eni zancha, as we said on the bottom of Yud Beis Amud Aleph. Why? Because there's another comment of Rav. To Amar Rav says, Hamakti shidei avdo, a person who sanctifies all of the handiwork of his eved, oso ha'eved, oso ve'ochel, that eved has to do something in order to eat. Di'ilo avda, if he doesn't work to eat, man palachle, who's going to feed him? Who's going to work to feed him? Obviously, he must be serving himself. Now, I amris bishlama, that both statements of Rav are saying the same thing. Hach b'mayla, the hach is a reference to the comment on the bottom of Yud Beis Amud Aleph, and that's where b'mayla we're feeding him. Ve'eno yachol, and you're not allowed to say asei mi ve'eni zancha. Ve'ha b'she'eno mayla, and this brisa over here, it's not a brisa, this comment of Rav, this memra is b'she'eno mayla, where you're not feeding him shapir, then all the shitas of Rav align. Ella, says the Gemara, third of the way down, we're going to be going to the two dots. It's actually not a two dots, but we're stopping at the word Tanya at about 15 lines from the bottom. So it says the Gemara, Ella Amris Hach, if the first comment of Rav on the bottom of Yud Beis Amud Aleph is B'She'eno Mayla V'Yachol, where he wasn't fed, and we are allowed to say Asei Mi Ve'eni Zancha, Di'ilo Avda Man Palachle, because he's got to find a way to feed himself. Man De'Bay Niflache, we have no one who's going to feed him. Elalav, it must be Shma Mina, Eno Yachol, Shma Mina. This is the opinion of Rav of Eno Yachol, that he's not allowed to say Asei Mi Ve'eni Zancha. Where do we see this from? Because in Rav's first comment, we on the bottom of Yud Beis Amud Aleph, we had said Ma'ila lo mazonos. He did give him mazonos, and if he's giving him mazonos, why would he do that? It must be that you're not allowed to say asei imi ve'eni zancha. That is the shita of Rav. Now let's see a shita of his counterpart of Rav Yochanan, Tashma, third of the way down. To Amar Rav Yochanan says, Hakotea yad avdo shel chavero. Let's say that I cut off the hand of your slave. So what's the din? The din is that I have to pay you. What do I have to pay you? No saying shivto urefuaso lerabo. I have to give sheves, those are the wages for lost labor. And however that's calculated, that's discussed in Bava Kama. Urefuaso, and I have to pay the bill for healing that goes to the Rav. So says the Gemara, continuing in this comment of Rav Yochanan, ve'oso ha'eved nizon minat tzedakah. Who feeds the eved when he's in the hospital? Tzedakah. Why not the master? Must be Shma Mina, says the Gemara. Yachol harav lomar le'eved asei mi ve'eni zancha. Maybe Rav Yochanan argues with Rav. Rav, as we saw in the bottom of Yud Beis Amud Aleph and here on the top of Yud Beis Amud Beis, Rav was of the opinion you cannot say asei imi ve'eni zancha. Rav Yochanan shows in this case that when I injure your slave and he's fed from charity, he's fed from the tamchui, and he's not fed from the Rav, it must be that asei mi ve'eni zancha, says the Gemara. Not necessarily. Maybe Rav Yochanan doesn't hold that way. Hacha b'maya skinan, and maybe it's b'mayla lo mazonos. Perhaps it is where he has already been given food, and if he wants anything extra, yachi amai nizam ninasaka lo hadafa. And why is he going to the Tamchui? He's going to the Chicago Chesed Fund to get some extra food because he's hungry. But really, maybe the Bailam, maybe the Rav actually gave him enough food. So says the Gemara, Ihachi, if that's true, then the word nizon is not the right word. Nizon is the word that we use to assume minimum requirements of food. But now he's eating extra. It should say that misparnes from tzedakah mi baile. Misparnes is, okay, this guy's making a living. This isn't the minimum calorie intake. He wants more food and he's getting more food. So then the word nizon is wrong. Elalav shmamina, yachol shmamina. It must therefore be that we are talking about a case where someone is allowed to say, aseimi ve'eni zancha. One last small set of questions and then we'll stop for the day. Omar Mar, we had said in the name of Rav Yochanan, no sein shivta urefuaso the Rabbo, that if I cut off the hand of your Eved, the din is that I have to pay you, my friend, and who is the Rav of the Eved, I have to pay you sheves and ripui. I have to pay you for the lost wages and I have to pay you for the healing. Shivto pshita. Obviously, if I caused you lost wages, pashat, that I have to give that money to you. So says the Gemara, why did it say shivto? Only because of the following refuah suistricha. You're right, sheves was obvious, but the chiddush was the refuah. So says the Gemara, refuah so didehu deboy itzuyeba. Why are we giving money to the Rab? The person who's injured is the Eved. I cut off his hand. He's got to buy prosthetics. He's got to have surgeries, whatever it is. Why is the money going to the Rab? Says the Gemara, lo tzricha, there's only money going to the Rav in a unique scenario, where really there was an assumption of 5 days worth of healing. And let's assume it's $100 a day. I owe $500 for refuah. But the Avdulay Sama Kharifa, the doctor gave him a much stronger medication, and he healed faster. Ma'udatema tsa'ar who the extra $200 is the tsa'ar of the person who got injured, the Eved, and the money goes to him. Kamash malan, that no, the money that goes to the Eved is only for that which will heal him, and that which is left over, if he heals faster, goes back to the Rav. We'll stop right here at Tanya. We'll pick up in Yirtzeh Hashem tomorrow on Monday night. Is today Sunday? Yes. We'll say so. Monday night we're together. Tuesday night we're together. Wednesday I'm recording and posting, and then I'm back in town again. Wishing you all a beautiful night.